Welcome and thanks for joining me for this concept. Today we're talking about samples and surveys. There are a few definitions that we need to discuss before we get started. Sample versus population. Think of it this way. The population is the whole and the sample is part of that. Sometimes it's too difficult to survey everybody, say in the United States, to get how they feel about a particular topic. So what we do is we take a small sample of that whole population and ask them what they think about and use that to get an idea of what the whole population thinks. So the population is the whole thing. The sample is just a part. Now we need to talk about qualitative versus quantitative data. Quantitative data has units that can be measured and numerically compared. For example, age, weight, and time can all be measured and compared using numbers. Qualitative data describes a category and cannot be measured or numerically compared. For example, hair color, attitude, or zip code. The way that I keep these separate or straight in my mind is when I think of quantitative, I think of a quantity. I can actually get a quantity for this particular thing to compare it. When I think of qualitative, I think of quality. I'm looking at the quality of something. So there's no numbers attached to it. I'm just looking at the quality. We now need to discuss univariate versus bivariate data. Well, if you remember, uni, like a unicycle, means one, or bi, like a bicycle, means two. That's going to help you. Univariate data is a set of data that uses one variable. For example, how many sports you play only has one variable, so that's univariate data. Bivariate data is a set of data that uses two variables. For example, if you're looking at the height and weight of your friends, there are two variables involved there, height and weight. So univariate means one variable, bivariate means two variable. Now let's look at different types of sampling methods. Remember, we talked about sometimes it's hard to question everybody in a whole population, and so you just want to take a small sample of that population. Well, there are three different ways that you can take that sample. The first we're going to talk about is called a random sample. In a random sample, you survey the population at random. So, for example, I might survey the people whose names I draw out of a hat. That's considered a random sample. It's just randomly drawn out of a hat. In a systematic sample, you're going to select a number, let's say 5, okay? And then you're going to survey every fifth person. That's an example of a systematic. There's some system to the way that you're picking the people out of the group. In a stratified sampling, you're going to separate a population into smaller groups and then survey that group at random. Here's what I mean. If you separate a high school into 4 groups by grade level, and then you survey a random sampling in each grade level, that's called stratified. So you take the whole population, you break them into some kind of organized groups by some characteristic, like grade level or in a particular neighborhood. And then within that smaller group, you just randomly sample them. That's stratified. Let's identify the types of data. So here we are asked to identify whether this is qualitative or quantitative data. Remember, qualitative is a quality, quantitative is a number. Ounces per package. Well, ounces I can measure and I can attach a number to it. So that is quantitative. My birthday month, that really isn't a number. I'm not measuring anything, even though sometimes we attribute 1 to January and 2 to February. There really is nothing to measure. So this is qualitative. Now identify whether this is univariate or bivariate data. The number of games played. Well, the only thing I'm measuring are the number of games, so this is univariate data. The width and depth of a lake, well, I'm measuring the width and the depth, so I have two things there, so that's bivariate data. Identify the sampling method. Every student whose driver's license ends in an odd number is asked to complete a survey on safe driving habits. Well, I'm not necessarily picking every fifth person, but I am in a very systematic way picking who I'm sampling because I'm picking everyone with an odd number. So this is systematic. You ask 15 of the residents on your street whether they support the local bond issue to build a community center across town. Well, am I asking just 15 residents of any neighborhood, the whole entire population, or have I taken the whole entire population and broke it into subgroups, like neighborhoods, which is what you've done in this case. So once you take a whole population and break it into subgroups, and then randomly pick from that subgroup, that's called stratified. Now it's time for you to practice. Go ahead, pause the video and answer these questions. Is the price of milk qualitative or quantitative? Well, can you measure it? You can measure the price of milk and you can attach a number to it. So that's quantitative. If a teacher separates the students into boys and girls and randomly selects 2 from each group to survey, is that random, systematic, or stratified? Well, I haven't randomly selected everybody, and there's sort of a system to it, but I've taken the whole population and broken it into subgroups and then randomly selected from those subgroups, so that is stratified. I want to thank you for joining me for this concept. Don't forget to finish your whisk. You've watched the video and summarized the notes, so now all you have to do is submit your answer to the question. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.